Introduce Ruth Budge to tell us about her experience. Please welcome Ruth.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to talk to you today about my experience with heart disease, and maybe we might wonder when my journey actually began. Whilst I was preparing to come to Canberra, a woman asked me what I was going to be doing in Canberra, and I said to her that we were going to discuss heart disease and I was going to talk about my experience. Her immediate response to me was, "Oh, did your husband have a heart attack?" So for all Australian women, I hope today that some small insights from my experience with cardiac disease may contribute to help change this perception, because I really think it's this sort of automatic response that sums up the lack of current awareness of the incidence of cardiac disease in women in Australia today. Now, I was diagnosed with heart disease in June of this year, subsequent to investigations and exclusion of every other possible cause of two falls which occurred for me last year while I was out on my daily walks, and they were quite significant falls in that I had no warning and I lost consciousness. But I considered that perhaps they were balance issues, as no one seemed to think there was any other significant cause. So I went off and joined an outdoor group training program, and I happened to run in the Barossa Valley running event this year because I considered I was very well. However, within a very short time, I was to have a defibrillator, a pacemaker, and a loop recorder implanted in my chest. So in fact, I brought the crash team today in my heart, and I believe I'm safe here with a room full of cardiologists should my nerves get the better of me. So look, I'm an ordinary 63-year-old educated Australian woman. I've been a registered nurse since 1974, and in 2013 I attained a Master's in Counselling and Psychotherapy at the Adelaide University. And both of these positions require quite a high degree of self-awareness, but I was completely unaware of what was going on in my heart. So I was diagnosed eventually with left bundle branch block and sinus node disease, synocope, which the falls were probably cardiogenic, myocardiomyopathy, and runs of ventricular tachycardia and flutter that were quite fast. But the thing that's upset me quite a bit was that every other thing was excluded before I was eventually referred to the cardiologist. Now I know I should have known, but I'm the patient in this case. But I didn't say to the doctor, well, I just didn't know what questions to ask that I would be at risk of cardiovascular disease. But you see, when I got to the cardiologist, of course, he asked all the right questions. And yes, even though I had no idea because I was well. And even when I was in the cardiologist's office, I said to him, quite boldly, I guess, when he told me, "This is serious, Mrs. Budge," and I said, "Well, can I have a look at the ECG, please?" Because I did not really, even at that stage, believe that there was something wrong with my heart. But I've always had low blood pressure and a slow pulse, and I fainted on and off as a child and teenager, and then as an adult I've been quite dizzy at times getting up from standing. But look, I've got no cardiac vessel disease, I'm not a diabetic, I've got normal cholesterol, and I've exercised and walked almost every day for the last 25 years. So I didn't sort of fit the picture in one way, but I obviously did in other ways. So the treatment I've had is, as I've said, all the electrical things in my heart to sort of correct both problems, and that the chambers were out of sync, and so that's why I got the pacemaker. And then because of the ventricular tachycardia and the flutter and all of that stuff, I ended up having a defibrillator put in later at the end of his list. And so now I take medication, which I think is a beta blocker, but that dropped my blood pressure, so it's been a bit of a bit of a trade-off as to that sort of stuff. And my life has gone back to normal in many ways. In many ways, I'm very fortunate to be here telling the tale, but not being able to drive a car, not being able to manage my family like I had, not being able to enjoy looking after my grandchildren in ways, they were all losses. And the understanding that my life was quite changed forever sometimes overwhelms me, and I get a bit lonely and teary, and then really I just think how fortunate I am. So, and of course all my ordinary coping skills of stress really help, but I think, this has affected my children and my sisters as well. I've got 4 daughters, 2 sisters. I really hope that things change for them, and I really wish that I had got to see the cardiologist before every other disease was excluded. I think that really got to me, and because the story I mightn't have been here to tell you today. So, and I was saying earlier, I was in the change room, women's change room last week, and here we are, and this is not just in the doctor's office, but this is there, and we have this the breast cancer awareness, regular chest, do this and this, and if that happens, do that. And then the same with cervical cancer, go and have a pap smear, and if there are any changes or discharge or anything like that, do this. But what was there to say to me when I went to the doctor and I was tired, or when I had low blood pressure, or when I fell over? It wasn't supposed to be me, but I felt lots of those things were dismissed, and I would be really happy if all this research continues to go on, and as the experienced cardiologist tells us, it needs to be at ground level, because then us ordinary women in Australia will have the knowledge. Thank you.
Everyone give Ruth a round of applause. So before you go, Ruth, I just wanted to say, and we sort of touched on it earlier, what would be your one message for Australian women, given what you've been through in your experience? What would your message to them be if they had some of these symptoms that you had?
Well, I guess I'd go to the GP with a bit more of a proactive attitude, in that perhaps when I said, oh, look, something's wrong with me, but and you might be vague about it, I'll say to him, well, look, this has happened, that's happened, or her, I should say, this and that have happened. What should I be looking out for if this is going to be a risk for my heart? Can you tell me when I go home if this happens to race back to your office? Or yes, and then I guess one of the big things I've learned is not to take anything for granted, but to be your best own advocate, and not to have symptoms dismissed as, oh, women are always tired because they try to do everything. And really, I guess I don't take much for granted anymore, and I feel very grateful and live in the now, because there mightn't be tomorrow.
Well, we're very grateful that you could make some time